I focus on becoming mindful and becoming more aware, I become more in tune, more in touch, and ultimately more on top. If you would like to use the word in control, I become more in control of my destiny.
All right, hello everyone and welcome. I have the honor today of speaking with Mr. John St. James, best-selling author of, actually, I have his book right here, The Master's Path, How to Intentionally Create More Happiness, Joy, and Fulfillment in Your Life. And we're going to be speaking about mindfulness today. And sir, regarding mindfulness, I think that's one of those terms you hear a lot. You hear it everywhere. Whether it be, in corporate America or just in books, in videos. And I think because it's such a prolific term, people don't necessarily know how to apply it to themselves.
Right.
So in speaking with mindfulness, how do you describe and apply mindfulness?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there is a lot of confusion because I think sometimes people confuse mindfulness with meditation or meditation with mindfulness. Um, and really they're separate. One basically works to help the other, and we'll talk about that today. Basically, mindfulness is being fully immersed in the present moment. It's being in the moment. It's being in the now. It's actually being totally aware and conscious of what is going on at any given time. And that time that you're in is the moment. And so it's being non-judgmental as well. It's being so, like, in other words, if I'm aware of a thought or a feeling or some type of a sensory perception, you know, instead of just judging it, it's just being aware that it's taking place, which actually can help you to better understand what you might do for the next step, whatever that step is. So it's really being in tune with what's going on in the moment and being, mindful, full of the mind in that moment. It does actually work. I have an old saying. I say, be alert, be aware, be conscious, and be clear. One of the things that I want to share with everybody today is, as I've studied the most successful people, and I do a lot of that. I mentor with people, and I mentor with very successful people. And one of the things that I've come to learn is the most successful people are the most aware.
Mm.
Awareness is a key attribute or trait for success in life.
Yes, sir. So, and I wrote a couple quick notes down while you're talking. The awareness and the mindfulness, talked about feelings or sensory, and this is where I think confusion comes in, or not necessarily confusion, but the not knowing exactly how to apply it. Are we talking like I am aware of what is physically around me, what's going on, or what's going on internally, or both?
Both, yeah, both. So there's different levels of awareness, right? So let's break it into, there's self-awareness.
Mm.
So know thyself first and foremost.
Yeah.
Starts with you, being aware of yourself, but it also includes situational awareness. I know you and I are both have a love for the martial arts. And we've studied the martial arts for many, many years. And what we know to be true is that first you have to be aware of your circumstances, your strengths, your limitations. And when it comes to self-defense, you need to know that first. But then you need to be aware of the situation you're in. You need to be aware of the environment that you're in. So being mindful is both. It's being mindful of yourself, but also being mindful of your surroundings. And the longer you train in mindfulness, you reach that third level of awareness, which very few people ever reach. And that's called heightened awareness. And the best way for me to explain that real quickly is most people are operating at like 130 degrees of awareness. So they see pretty much what's in front of them, and they see a little bit of what's going on the sides. But they're unaware of what's happening at 180 degrees. They really don't see what's going on out here. And so the more we train our mind to be aware, alert, conscious, clear, the more we expand our field of vision and awareness, we can start to realize, okay, maybe 180 degrees of awareness. But somebody who's trained for a very long time and are very, very in tune and in touch with their thoughts, their feelings, sensory perceptions, both mind, body, and spirit, they become aware at 360 degrees, complete awareness. There's a Japanese term I've shared with you and others before. It's called Happo Zanshin, and it just means 8-way awareness, awareness in all directions. So, self-awareness first, situational awareness second, and then heightened awareness is our goal. It's to be able to train in mindfulness to the point where we start to gain insight and intuition, and we start to feel the energy, the vibe. We get the gut.
Yes,
So
sir.
the gut is part of the awareness.
So that kind of speaks to, because I was curious, I know in my life the benefits of mindfulness and awareness. And I was going to ask you to kind of, excuse me, to elaborate on those benefits. You had talked about heightened awareness, and that's definitely one of them. How would you categorize the benefits of, because we're talking about practicing this, right? This becoming a discipline. So
Yeah.
if I'm taking this on, what are those benefits? Why would somebody be interested in practicing mindfulness, in taking on this discipline?
Sure. Well, definitely, I would say, overall, mental well-being, good health, good mental health. Now, having said that, there's really 4 pillars to having a healthy mind. Okay, and I'm going to give them to you, but they're not in any particular order.
Yes,
But they're all important. And so I like to start with purpose. For us to have a healthy mind, we to start to feel fulfilled, we start to understand that if we have a purpose, and that purpose is bigger than us, we start to gain happiness and joy. And as I say in the book, fulfillment. So purpose first. The second one is awareness. We've been talking about it, and we'll be talking about it all day long, because mindfulness is really awareness training, is really what it is. And so if we have a big enough purpose and we are aware of our thoughts, our feelings, our perceptions, even our biases, because we all have those as well. If we're aware of those things, now the third part of the third pillar comes into play, and that's connection. For us to have a healthy mind, we have to feel connected. A member of some tribe, whatever that tribe's going to be. So, it could be your family, it could be your friends, it could be your career or workplace, it could be your avocation, whatever it is, there's a feeling or a need for connection, for a healthy mind. And then the last one is insight. And we talked about that with the heightened awareness training. The more I train in mindfulness, the more I develop my insight, the ability to see within, right? Right. That's the difference between seeing and vision. Seeing I do with my eyes, vision I do with my mind. So if I have insight, I have vision within my own mind of where my strengths are, where my weaknesses are, and more importantly, how I can better serve others because I'm making a connection with them. Okay, so it helps with overall mental well-being. It can also reduce stress and anxiety. It can help enhance focus and productivity. And I'll use a quick example for that. We have an old saying, I say it all the time. I forget where I first heard this. I want to say it was at a seminar I was at. Somebody said, where attention goes, energy flows. And the idea is that wherever we focus our mental energy, our mind, is where we start to develop growth of any type. So if I focus in on a target, that may be a goal, that may be something else, whatever it is, when I put my mind to it, I focus in on it, I start to develop that. So when I focus on becoming mindful and becoming more aware, I become more in tune, more in touch, and ultimately more on top. If you would like to use the word in control, I become more in control of my destiny
Yes, sir.
because I'm more aware of what's going on around me. So that obviously helps, because I do think a lot of times people feel out of control, and it's easy to feel out of control in the world we live in. Would you agree, right? We'll talk a little bit about that later, but I hope that answered your question.
It does, absolutely. And you said something that kind of sparked off a thought. Talking about connection, family awareness, um, connections with family, friends, connections with others is, I think, the third benefit you had mentioned. I know in my journey through mindfulness and awareness, um, uh, fixing myself first so I can be better for those around me. It, is that a thing? I mean, where mindfulness can actually help enhance your external relationships as well?
Absolutely. And that's a great question. That is, because if you really, if you think about a relationship, it requires that there is a connection.
Sure.
And that connection can be based on trust, usually is, based on influence, based on respect. Uh, but it starts with awareness. It's making a connection through communication, number one, which we're doing right now. I'm saying something to you, you're being mindful and listening. Then you're asking a question based on what you heard. You're trying to uh, be a better listener. That's what I'm trying to do as well. So that requires mindfulness,
Sure.
because I'm sure you have and I have both. You know, in our daily routine, somebody's talking to us. It could be a family member, it could be a coworker that's always talking to us. And it's not that we intentionally tune them out, but we may be distracted. Something may be going on, and we're only catching a little bit. We may be catching words, but we're not getting the full meaning.
Yes, sir.
So when we're mindful of not just our own thoughts, our own emotions, our own perceptions, but when we are a better listener and we communicate at a higher level, we become more emphatic. We're able to empathize, excuse me, if I could speak. You're able to empathize with other people's feelings. And we've all learned this. People don't care how much you know, but they do care how much you care. So if you are able to connect with somebody at a higher level or a deeper level, you also start to understand their pain points. And I want to take just a moment on that, because that in itself is somewhat of an interesting side note to being mindful. If I'm connected with somebody at a deeper level and I ask good questions, and I'm sensing not just their words, but I'm sensing their nonverbal cues. I'm even sensing at a deeper level their energy. I'm reading their energy. I'm able then to maybe pick up on what are called pain points. Now, again, I'm going to go back to the martial arts. In the martial arts, we have what are called pressure points throughout the body.
Sure.
But we have actually more pain points than we have pressure points. Pain points are mental, emotional, spiritual, financial. These are things that cause us pain, right? And as you know, all humans, you, me, everybody, we're either moving towards pleasure and away from pain, or motivated the opposite way. We're moving away from pain towards pleasure. Either way, here's what we know. We know that if somebody has pain, including yourself, if we're more aware of what that pain is, we're more able to connect with that individual on a visceral level and say, you know what? I understand how you feel. I have felt the same way before because you have. We all have anger, we all have frustration, we all have jealousy, every negative trait that an individual has, we've all experienced. So if you can meet them where they are, connect with them on the pain points, you're better able to do what we call stopping inner and outer conflict. In my book, we talk a little bit about that. It's the Mudo, right? And the Mudo is simply a term that means the martial way. And it's somewhat, it's one of these things it's hard to put your finger on because a lot of people go, what does that mean? I thought the martial arts were inflicting pain, but it's actually just the opposite. It's more about trying to alleviate and heal. And by doing that, you are helping the individual to their highest level. And so when I go back to developing relationships with people and how do I do that, the first thing I want to do is I want to be able to communicate my care, my concern. I want to listen carefully. All of this is tied back to mindfulness and mindfulness training.
Yes, sir. I know definitely the more I am able to quiet my mind and the more I'm able to be there for those around me to hear them. And then inversely, as you were saying, when I'm speaking with someone, sharing something, whether it's something personal or something deep, you get that sense, are they listening to me just to get through this conversation, or are they hearing me?
Mm-hmm.
And when you feel that they're hearing you, there is that definite deep connection that is pretty powerful. So in that regard, we've talked about the benefits. What is mindfulness? How does it work? How do you actually put that into practice, though, would be my question. Because I know how my journey, how I've done that, but I think for a lot of folks, there's, especially for me, there was just that habit of letting my mind run.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and we keep going back to the martial arts, another term, monkey mind, right? It's going crazy all the time. How does somebody who says, okay, this sounds tremendous, I want to do this, how
Right.
do they put that into practice?
That's a great question. And again, this comes back to we all have we all have a starting point. Everybody starts where they are.
Yeah.
So let's think about the types of things we do during the day. We wake up in the morning. A lot of us are somewhat unconscious until we get our first cup of coffee.
Sure.
Yeah. Everything is based off of habits and routines, right? Our daily routines determine how we go about doing things. So the first thing we do is, think about the first thing you do in the morning is if you start in the morning with empowering questions, positive self-talk, you're starting to set already into your mind that, today's going to matter. I'm going to live in the now. I'm not only going to get up, but I'm going to get up with purpose.
So
So,
how do you do that? So is that like just a mental routine, or do you write it down, or like what's an
oh
example?
yes, that's great. No, I mean, there's lots of ways to do that, but asking empowering questions will
Okay.
give you empowering answers. So
Of
as an
yourself?
yeah, as an
Okay.
example, it's absolutely self-talk.
Okay.
As an example, now some people would meditate, and meditation's great. I mean, I highly recommend meditation. And there's lots of ways to meditate. But if you're not comfortable meditating, a form of meditation is self-talk,
Sure.
positive affirmations. And so years ago, I give credit where credit's due. I learned this from Tony Robbins back in the 80s, I believe. So I'm going to date myself. But, he had this little acronym, PEG, HCL, PEG, PEG, HCL. And it stands for, what am I most proud of? What am I most excited about? What am I most grateful for? What am I most happy about? What am I most committed about? And who do I love most and who loves me? Now, whether you do that every day or not, even just focusing on being grateful,
Mhm.
starting your day with being grateful. Hey, I woke up. I'm alive. How many people don't have that experience, right? I mean, how many people aren't born and live for the now it's amazing. So, but meditation is one. Another one very quickly is being mindful in your breathing. This goes back a little bit towards meditation because we use mindful breathing to quiet the mind, to still the mind. Having said, because and I know we have this little, I call it the little voice in your head, and some of us have that voice going at 1,000 words per minute. The self talk can be real good.
Mhm.
Positive affirmations can be very positive. However, comma, there can be a lot of negative communication going on, and a lot of self-doubt and a lot of worry and a lot of that is part of mindful breathing, because if we were to breathe properly and focus in on our breathing, that will quiet our mind. That will also help our focus because the mind's getting more oxygen.
Sure.
And so ultimately, we can do it with self talk, we can do it with breathing, we can do it with movement. And here again, you and I keep coming back to because we have experience with the martial arts.
That's right.
So whether we were doing it with soft style martial arts like Tai Chi or something like yoga, or a hard style martial art like we study the karate or taekwondo or tang soo or whatever style it is that you take, mindful movement helps develop mindfulness. And so,
Is that a focus thing, sir? Because you're
it,
okay.
absolutely. When I focus in on what I'm doing at the moment, whatever that is, whatever that is. That could be tying my shoe. I remember, and I'll just use this for, you'll get a kick out of this. But at some point in my training, I was very new to the training. I was trying to develop my balance. And I
Sure.
was working at a steel mill at the time. And everybody comes in the morning to the steel mill, I can speak, and they got to put on their safety shoes because that's, you've got to do that first. Uh, and so, everybody else is sitting down on the bench and they're tying their shoes, their boots, their specific work boots. And, I'm putting my leg up, I'm standing in a crane stance and I'm putting my boot on with my knee fully, chambered, and I'm tying my shoe on one leg.
Mhm.
And people are looking at me like I'm nuts, right? And to them, I was nuts, I'm sure. But I was having to be extremely mindful at that moment
Yeah.
of what I was doing. It wasn't an unconscious act because we tie our shoes every day. We don't have to think about tying our shoes, right?
Sure.
But when you do something that pulls you out of your comfort zone,
Yeah.
now you have to really focus in. So, mindful breathing, a mindful movement. Oh, here's one for you. You asked me how to practice it. Here's something you do every day other than breathe and get up and move. You eat
Yeah.
every single day. And so, mindful eating. There's an Okinawan term, and it escapes me. I used to know it, and I can't think of it now. But there's an actual Okinawan practice of mindful eating. If you looked it up, you'll get the word for it. But what it is it's not just being aware of the portion of food you're eating or the type of food you're eating, right? You
Mhm.
know, so it's like if we get in the habit of waking up and going to grab that coffee and we've anchored a donut every morning with that coffee. I'm not saying, I'm just saying, if you know what I'm saying, then at some point that becomes something that is a habit. Now, if we take the time to really think through, what are we eating? Is it going to nourish us, or is it going to give us a quick jolt of sugar, right? Now we're more mindful of what we're eating, which leads to better nutrition, which leads to better health. So portions, type of food we're eating, how fast we're eating. I mean, I know you and I both, and everybody listening today, I don't care how disciplined you are, when you have been very, very hungry, starving, you feel like you're starving. And let's say you go to this Mexican restaurant, because I love Mexican food, and they've got a big bowl of corn chips in front of you. And all of a sudden, you are just devouring these chips. You're not even thinking about eating, you're stuffing your face.
Sir.
Everybody has done this. I don't care who you are. So being aware of moving, how you move, how you breathe, how you eat, how you think, how you speak. As I share with my clients, my students, we're always training. We're always training. There's nothing that we do that is not training. We're always trying to get better at what we do. I hope I answered your question.
It does, and I'm sorry, you did. And as you're talking, to me, it almost seems like it boils down to just being in that moment, aware of what's going on in that moment. And for the self-talk, I know that's been very powerful in my life. I know some folks, and myself included, I think we tend to discount that. Oh, I'm going to say happy things, and happy things are going to happen.
Yeah.
And for me, I forget what you called it, the voice. For me, I called it the movie maker. I would wake up stressed about something. The scenario, I would literally run this movie in my head of a scenario that hasn't even happened. I get completely stressed out about it. 3-4 minutes in, I'm like, wait a minute. Literally what I'm stressed out about hasn't even happened. I made this up in my mind. And then I had to take that one step further and acknowledge, okay, equal and opposite reactions, right? If this works, if I can stress myself out in 3-4 minutes about something that hasn't even happened, why can it not be as powerful in the reverse?
Absolutely.
So I fully endorse what you're saying. What endorse everything you're saying.
Thank you.
So not endorse. That's the wrong way to say it. Like my
No, I know.
endorsement. Like my
Yeah,
endorsement carries so much weight.
you endorse, you agree, you
I
understand.
agree fully. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I get it. I
Yes,
get
I
it.
fully agree. Um, because doing that in reverse, whether, like you said, focusing on what I'm grateful for or the things that are great in my life, and just changing that focus. And then, like I said, the more you were talking, the more it really it hit me, just being in that moment, allowing yourself to be in that moment. I think that's tremendous. um, I do want to get back to your book though, because in the book you talk about um, being a total practitioner.
Right.
I'd like you to kind of just briefly, what does that mean? But after that, how does then practicing mindfulness help you in becoming a total practitioner?
Right. That's a great question. Yeah, we have a program that we teach, and it's called Transformation to Total Practitioner, T3P. And so what it is for us to, I guess, the best way to say it is to operate at our highest level. For us to be the best that we can be, we have to become great at the practice of life. Okay. And life, as you know, it's mental, it's physical, it's emotional, it's spiritual, it's financial, it's all of these things. So rather than focusing on, being good at one thing, we want to really focus at what is the core, what are the main attributes that are needed to be our very, very best. So, um, one of those, of course, and it starts again with awareness, but one of them is to be intentional. And so I use the acronym DIA, which stands for Decide in Advance. So it's to decide in advance to live intentionally. This goes back to purpose. If I have a purpose and I know what that purpose is, and if that purpose is bigger than me, it's to serve humanity. It's to help people at the very highest level that I'm capable of. Well, then I'm going to start working on that. And as you said earlier, you said it beautifully. I found that if I work on myself first, if I improve myself, I'm better able to help my loved ones. I'm better able to do the things that I want to do. So it starts with being mindful that we all have these areas that we can focus in on and we can strengthen. And one of them is to live intentionally. When we start to do that, we start to realize over time, it's got a compound effect that we start to develop, our superpowers, if you will. And what I mean by that is the things that we do really well, because all of us have God-given gifts, whatever those are. Some people are really good at writing, some people are good at speaking, some people are good at technical things or computers or whatever it is, graphics, whatever, artistry. All of these things are our superpowers. In my book, I call it the spiritual gift of the artist.
Sure.
Because I do believe, and this goes back to being mindful, I believe that to help somebody, anybody, to serve them at the highest level, you do have to understand what it is that they need, because everybody has wants, needs, and desires. So if I know what somebody wants, needs, and desires, I'm better able to help them get there. So I'm actually using my spiritual gift or my superpower at the highest level. So that's part of it. Part of it, of course, is to develop strong relationships, to improve relationships. And how does that affect, being mindful? Well, if you think about it, let's go back to relationships in general. All relationships, whether you're talking about with your spouse, with your family, your brothers, sisters, your own children, work mates, people that you work with, whatever, everybody's going to have those tough conversations.
Yes, sir.
You know what I mean? There's going to be the good times, and then there's always going to be those tough times. And if you go into the relationship with I have a true care and understanding for where you're coming from, and I really do care and want to make this work, the person's going to be more apt to work with you because it's not a competition of who's better. It's I'm here to serve. I'm here to, the word, by the way, we were talking earlier about, I think even before we started the conversation today, the podcast, we were talking about the hero's journey. And, the word hero, interestingly enough, comes from the Greek word heros or hieros, which means to be a protector or a defender. So if you're a hero to somebody, you're a protector or defender. Well, to be a protector or defender, you have to be mindful of what it is that they're having an issue with. How do you defend them against something? So again, this goes back to building stronger relationships. It goes back to helping serve at the highest level. It goes back to actually healing others. Again, we talked about pain points. What we didn't talk about were trigger points. I want to very briefly talk about that, and I'll use both a physical example and quickly I'll use a mental example. But on the physical side, as we age, we all have pain, right? Everybody has pain as they get older. One of my dear friends, he's a client. He's also a medical doctor. He said, "Hey, as we get older, the thing that really brings us closer to our expiration date is inflammation."
Yeah. Yes, sir.
So anyway, back to the physical example. I don't know what I was doing, but I was doing something and I overextended with my right arm, and I have a trigger point here in my shoulder. And, it may be that at the hinge point itself, I don't know exactly what it is, but I do know that I overextended. And so what happens is if I reach a little too far in a certain way, I get this pain.
Sir.
The same thing happens mentally. And you're probably going to say, what does this have to do with mindfulness? And I'm going to tell you everything because we have what's called the self-identity set point. And again, I talk about it in my book, The Master's Path, and I liken that to the thermostat in your home. If your thermostat is set at 73 and the house gets too hot, the air conditioning kicks in because we're no longer in the comfort zone, which is called homeostasis. If it gets too cold, the heat kicks in and brings it back to where it's supposed to be. Your mind's doing the same thing all the time. Whenever you have a new concept, a new idea, a new thing you've got to do, maybe public speaking, talking to somebody that is your superior at work, trying to sell an idea, whatever it is, once you start to reach beyond your comfort zone, you hit what's called a terror barrier of terror, and it is a trigger point, and it triggers pain. Now, what does it have to do with being mindful? Well, when you're mindful, and this goes back to transformation to total practitioner, when you're mindful of where your comfort zone is, and if your goal is to become better, and you know the really the only way to get better is to desensitize yourself to discomfort. Most people don't think of it this way, but to grow, you have to get used to discomfort because everything you ever wanted is uphill.
Sure.
Really, all the good stuff is uphill.
No, I agree.
So with that having been said, going back to being mindful, if I know this going in, if I'm mindful that I have these trigger points, if I know before it happens that, okay, I'm going to do this, but it's going to cause fear of failure. It's going to cause fear of the unknown. It's going to cause the fear of rejection, the fear of loss, the fear of fear, go on, whatever it is, the fear of embarrassment. I'm never going to do these things that I really want to do. So if I'm aware of that before I even get there, and I know, okay, I've got to go through a little discomfort, that's okay. It's like being in the training hall. If I know that to learn self-defense, I have to learn how to fall because eventually we're going to hit the ground, then I'm better able to prepare for it, if that makes sense.
It does, and something you said just it hit me like a ton of bricks. The because I think it's something everybody reaching up, and all of a sudden you feel that,
Yes.
but then transferring it to the mental, having a great day, things are going great. You think of something in your life that isn't that great, broken relationship, whatever it is, that just pops in, and then the immediate same mental recoil that no, I don't want to think about that.
That's
I
right.
don't want to deal with that. Yeah, that's powerful. I chuckled earlier because you were talking about attention and meaningful conversation or relationships with family or children. And I've got a 15-year-old daughter, teenager, who it is a struggle to have a meaningful conversation.
Sure.
How was your
Absolutely.
day? Fine. How was school? Fine. So anyway,
No, I do understand. I was
yes.
15. I was 15 and so are you.
Well, and that's the only thing that keeps me from really losing my cool. I have to remind myself that I was the exact same way, and that's a teenage thing. It's
It is.
everything's fine, Dad.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yes, indeed.
So, okay, I do want to venture back to the book again. In the book, you talk about and same as like you kind of preface the what does it mean to be a total practitioner. In your book, you talk about the STAR formula.
Right.
I'd like you to expound on that a little bit, and then how does that apply to mindfulness?
So the STAR formula, it's just an acronym, and it stands for, there's actually two different ways to define it. And actually, one is more geared towards the reptilian mind. You called it the monkey brain. And one is more at a higher level. The easiest way to look at this is, stop and think before you act, and then review. So stop, think, act, review. The second definition is success through accepting responsibility. So let me break that down, and then I'll tie that back into mindfulness training. There's two parts to that. Let's start with stop, think, act, review. There's two parts to that. The first part is stop and think. Well, that requires being mindful.
And so
That
there's
that
the focus again.
that requires being aware, self-aware.
Sure.
So, then, so I'm going to stop and think, and then comes the action, the doing, and then the review. Now, here's what I know. I know that we get a lot further along on the path, the success path, the master's path, the path of the total practitioner, whatever we want to call it, the hero's path, the hero's journey. We go further down that path if we are mindful, and we can sense and feel without judgment, just understanding that this is, if I do this, this is the result I'm getting. All right. Some people, one of the things that I like to study, and I'm real big into, is the universal laws. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that today, but one of those laws, it's the ironclad law, is the law of cause and effect. If I do this, this is the effect. Okay. So if we go back to how does that work with being mindful, if I know that if I do this, it's going to do this. If I act this way, this is the result. If I say this, this is probably what's going to happen. Because based on my experience, both good and bad, I'm able to determine that. So the second part to that, success through accepting responsibility, is really just taking ownership.
Yeah.
Taking ownership of the fact that, and again, not being judgmental, right? Because being mindful is being aware and immersed in the present moment, but it's also about not being judgmental. It's about going, okay, if I do this, this is what happens. Is this the result I want? If this is not the result I want, let me try something different. So at this point, I'm going to take responsibility for my success, but I'm also going to take responsibility for my failures. I'm going to learn from them. I'm going to be mindful of them. And then I'm going to continue on the path, which is path of being a total practitioner. And I want to make sure I never really defined that. So I want to define it real before I forget. Being a total practitioner means I'm practicing the complete art. I'm practicing all portions of it. So I am taking responsibility for myself, because ultimately I'm the only one who can.
So when you say you're practicing the complete art, how are you defining the art?
Of life, the
Okay.
art of life. So that's where, to me, you could say it's an art, it's a science, it's both, but I look at it as an art. A practitioner, but being a practitioner practices science too. You've got scientists that practice their science, but for me, an art is something that you practice, you apprentice in, you work through it, you learn from it, you continually improve on it. Hopefully, you grow from it, and then you're better able to share it through service with others. And that's kind of the whole idea of being the total practitioner, not just for your own enjoyment, happiness, joy, and fulfillment, but really for helping others along the path.
Sure. No, I agree, and I think even the most hardened scientists would admit that there's not enough science out there to explain every aspect of life.
Oh, God, isn't that the case?
I think that's much grander. Um, on that, kind of delving deeper, right, into life as an art. Um, I'd like to not necessarily veer a little bit, but to go deeper in that layers.
Sure.
The things that we can't necessarily explain with science, the things that are kind of deeply known, being out in nature, our deep awareness of that. And you've spoken about this before, that deeper awareness. Sometimes you talked, and earlier on the podcast talked about meditation, going out in nature. If you can expound or just talk a little bit more on that, because we've kind of talked about this with focus on it and developing the whole person. How would, and again, kind of going deeper now into the if I want to pursue the meditation, or if I wanted to pursue even just quiet time,
Yes.
getting out into nature and working on becoming that whole person. Can you,
Right.
because again, I know I'm veering a little bit to the left here from what we've been talking about, but you and I have talked about this before. And I think it has value here in regard to mindfulness and focus and being in the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we're doing, every day, and this goes back to we live in a very, very fast-paced world where, it's full of volatility, uncertainty, conflict. Um, Things are going at such a pace. I was talking to somebody recently, and they were talking about the need to speed things up. In other words, with the competition that's out there today, we really need to speed things up and speed things up. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, there's a time to speed things up. There is. There's no doubt about it. This is, the philosophy of yin yang or yang, depending on your, where you come from. But yin yang being opposing yet complementary forces, which is part of nature. There is night and there's day. There's strong, there's weak, there's male, there's female, there's good times, there's bad times. Everything. There's cold weather, there's warm weather. There's always opposites. So in this case, yes, there is a time to speed up. We live in a digital world. We have information flying at us all the time. Many of us feel overwhelmed just trying to keep up with the amount of information that's coming at us.
Sure.
Now, what does that have to do with the whole person concept, becoming one with nature? Becoming one with nature would be like if I'm sitting at my computer. I'll give you a real example. Yesterday, I was sitting at my computer and I had lots and lots of people. They were emailing me with questions. Some of those were problems, concerns, things that they were asking my advice with. I was working through those. I was working on getting ready for the podcast. I was working on several other things. We've all been there. And I realized I had not taken a break in hours. I had probably been sitting at my desk for 4 hours without a break. Literally was starting to feel tension in my neck. You're sitting there and you've been working so long and you haven't moved and your neck starts to hurt. The next thing you know, you're going, geez, I haven't gotten up from my chair in a long time. Movement.
Sure.
So I got up. I moved to my screen and porch. We're blessed right now. We've been having, oh my gosh, I think yesterday was 78 degrees.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean,
Very nice.
and when we talk about nature, I'm not sure that is the kind of nature that we need to have in February, but I certainly enjoyed it, let me say. But having said that, went outside, I turned on, I have a waterfall. It's one of these automatic things. You flip a switch and I have this like 12 to 14-foot waterfall. And I'm sitting out there on my screen and porch and things are starting to bud. The birds are up there at the, feeding at the bird feeder. I'm hearing the birds, I'm hearing the waterfall. I'm starting to smell nature. Of course, flowers are, starting to bloom. And all of a sudden I'm starting to relax. That whole neck thing was gone.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's a very, very simple example of becoming one with nature. Not just going out into nature certainly helps. But you may live in the middle of the city and you can't get out into nature. So just becoming mindful of the fact that, I got this tension building here, and rather than go throw down a Tylenol or something to mask the pain, let me do a little bit of a pattern interrupt. Let me go outside into nature or take a walk or move, work on my breathing. There's an Asian art called Qigong, which is nothing more than energy breathing exercises. It's a way to cultivate energy. But when you do that, you're doing a massive pattern interrupt in a good way. You're interrupting a pattern that, back to the trigger point we talked about. When I start to feel this is a trigger point. What's causing that trigger point? Well, I'm mindful. I'm sitting in front of a computer too long.
Yeah.
So I guess there's a reason why they tell you at work you should get up every 10, 15, 30 minutes and just stretch and then sit back down or whatever. So becoming one with nature is being, I mentioned earlier about being insightful. As you do it more and more, you become insightful to the point where you start to realize, okay, there are better ways of doing things. Like now, of course, they have these desks. My wife has one that goes up. It's got an automatic motor on it, and so she can do that while she's standing. There are people that are now standing at desks on, oh my gosh, what do you call them? Where you walk?
They're kind of the mini treadmill thing, right?
Yeah, treadmill,
Yeah.
absolutely. And they're exercising as they're doing their work. So, being mindful doesn't mean you're just sitting there in some deep reflection. It means you're aware. You're really aware of what's going on inside of you, outside of you, and then you're able to bring those together to help yourself to the next level.
Yeah, that's powerful. I think so. I'll be honest with you. I think that is probably a great place to end this conversation, because I think what you said, how you said it, is just very powerful and very succinct. Sir, I want to thank you very much for this opportunity. I want to thank you for taking the time on this. I have so many things that came to mind of what you said, but this isn't about my thoughts.
Yeah.
But I do. I want to thank you for this, sir. It was very, but before I do end it, I do want to ask you, is there anything else that, in regard to mindfulness or just any of the topics that we've kind of veered off on this, sir, is there anything else that you want to cover, or, final thoughts you want to get in?
Yeah, I would just simply say very quickly, going back, it's about living in the now. It's making the moment count.
Sure.
It's, a lot of people miss the moment. I don't know where I heard this, but somebody somewhere, I think it was a TED talk, somebody was saying that, they did a study. I've always said, how do they do these studies? But they did a study with a group of people, and very briefly, they were tracking their conscious awareness, and they were going, out of X number of time, let's call it 20, let's call it 12 hours because they're sleeping, 8 to 10 hours. But let's say out of 12 hours, how much time were they really aware, fully aware of what was going on? And they found that the majority of people are only aware of what's going on about 47% of the time. So that means, 53% of the time we're either daydreaming or we're distracted or we're just not aware. We're on automatic pilot, right? So what I would leave our group with today is, make the moment count, live in the now, make it your masterpiece. Every moment, because really life is nothing more than a string of fleeting moments. Think about it. You got your past, your present, and your future. Most people are living in the past, right? Their glory days, right? When I was in high school, when I did this, when I did that. So that brings them joy. I get it. That's fine. But they're living in the past. A lot of people are so worried about the future that they're missing the moment. They're not living in the now. So I would leave the group with this: carpe diem. Not only seize the day, but even better, carpe momentum. Seize the moment. Because if your life is a series of moments which ebb and flow, your goal is to make them flow as much as possible. And the way to do that is to be mindful. If you're mindful of the moments, the minutes, the hours, the days, the weeks, the months, they all take care of themselves. I hope that helped, and I appreciate you very much, my friend.
Absolutely. And thank you, sir. I appreciate it. And everybody, we hope you enjoyed this conversation. We will be doing this again, so please stay tuned. And goodbye, everyone.